it's the only tool that can actually freeze a moment in time. There's nothing else they can do until they build a time machine, I guess. I'm Nopalito. I'm an artist. My medium is photography. So I'm from the city of La Habra, which is just right outside of LA County. Son of an immigrant. We grew up really poor. We just didn't know it because our family always provided for us. Growing up was all about family for me. My parents are from Pénjamo, Guanajuato, a little rancho called Magallanes, just right up on the hillside. I didn't start doing photography until I turned 27 years old, which is 3 years ago. When I first got my first smartphone when I was 18 and it had a camera on it, I was just like taking pictures of what all my homies were doing, you know? And they were always like, yo, those are dope photos. That was the first time I ever like really was like, man, like maybe like that's what I'm good at. I'm good at photography, but I didn't have the tools or anything like that. You know, I had just got out of doing some jail time, and my thing was I need to figure something out so I'm not stuck in that same routine. One day I went to a park to go hang out with a friend, and this guy just approached us and was like, hey, can I take your photo? And I was like, yeah, sure. You know, I'm not too sure why he wanted to take our photo, but he took our photo and he showed me a camera, right? He said he was shooting film. So I was like, how much does it cost to get a camera like that? And he's like, oh, I paid like 70 bucks for this one. That was the first time I realized that getting a camera might be affordable. So that was my first actual like spark at like, okay, now I'm gonna go get a camera. Yeah, and that's where it started for me. I didn't realize how, I guess, almost exclusive our world was to outsiders in that, like when I started presenting it on social media and like everyday things that I was seeing, and people were like, yo, that's crazy. Like, how did you get that photo? Like, what was the process for that? And I was just like, man, these are the people I just hang out with. Like, this is everyday life for me. I always want to represent for my community. I always want to represent for my people, you know? So for me to show it in a different light or something more personal that people don't get to see on an everyday basis was definitely my goal. You know, it ain't always just drugs and violence and you know, all this shit that the media depicts. There's a lot more to it. There's community, you know, there's a lot of love in my community. There's so much to it that I just wanted to represent that through my photos. The reaction was crazy. I didn't expect that. People were like, yo, these are good photos. Like who took this photo? Who took this photo? I'm like, yo, I took this photo. Like, I just got a camera, you know? Like, I just became a photographer. So that was my first interaction with Instagram, and people's response was like pretty positive. It's definitely a lot easier to be heard now. Social media has made that extremely easy. I mean, I have comrades from all over the country, from other countries, activism and documenting stuff like that. 2016 with the Donald Trump elections, I started going to like these crazy protests that were happening in like Huntington Beach and, you know, like down there where the rich people are at. And I was noticing that like on the news, like things were getting violent. So that's when I first realized that like, okay, maybe these things need to be documented. But when I finally because before I was documenting protests as well as like part of like documenting my community, right? So it wasn't until like I moved into TJ, to Tijuana, which is October of 2018, and started documenting the migrant caravans that were coming from Central America. And through my photos, we were helping like raise funds. We were getting people to send donations and stuff like that, like clothing items. And that was like the first time I was like, wow, this is where my purpose is right here. To highlight these events that are happening and help people out. Everybody would always bring this thing up. They're like, hey, you're blurring the lines between an activist and a journalist. And so at first I was like, what do you mean? And people would be like, yo, either you just come here, document, do not make yourself part of this story. That's the journalist's job. And I was like, well, if that's what I gotta do, then I don't wanna be a journalist. I wanna document what's going on in reality. And if those photos can spread awareness where I'm from or to anywhere around the world, and that can bring in money. At that time, they needed a lot of baby stuff, food, clothing, and stuff like that. Then by all means, I mean, I'd rather just be labeled an activist. It's traumatic. I mean, I'm on a federal watch list. I got an investigation by FBI, ICE, CBP, threatened with jail time. And I think the thing is, like, for me, I already come from that. I come from a world of police brutality. I come from a world of constant fear of authority. So going through that again, but on a different aspect as a photographer, I didn't expect the trauma that was gonna come with it, but depression is real, and post-traumatic stress disorder is real. From witnessing all the fucked up shit you see, from migrants being gassed to people being beaten and their eyes shot out with less lethal weapons, back to going home and being harassed by your local police, you know? Because there had been times, like, I mean, if you're looking at being on a federal watch list, you're being deported from Mexico, they're telling you the FBI is watching you, offered taking photos and trying to help some people out with clothing and food. You kind of started thinking, like, man, should I really even be out there? Like, this is just causing me more problems than not. And I was in that situation, but then eventually I realized, I was like, you know what? If I just do that and just sit here, then they're winning, and then I'm never gonna be free. But yeah, social media has definitely pushed me to that, like, to have to, like, constantly create, to, like, exhaust my body to be at every event, because I need to be the one to post those photos first, having to create specific content that they want. So, like, the photos kind of lose, like, there's a whole different focus to it now, you know? Now you're just trying to entertain an audience. Recently, I've stopped doing the daily posting thing. I'm still taking photos every day. I'm trying to focus more on what I like to do, what I want to see, where I want my photos to be. And I feel like in order for me to have a clear mind with that, I need to step away from social media for a little bit, because there is that constant demand that, like, you notice it. Like, once you stop being active on your social media, those unfollows start happening. You know, everybody has their own little thing. So, like, if I sit here and trying to please everybody's preference, I'm gonna forget about what I want. What I want to see in my photography, it's just a stamp in time. I existed, this was my story, and this is who I was. Because life is so temporary. I think that's, out of anything, that's my biggest motivator for my photography. Life is temporary. One minute you're here, the next you're not, you know? Our communities are constantly changing. As brown people, we're constantly being pushed out of our communities. So for me, with my photography in the future, what I want, it's just a stamp in time. I want that moment to be remembered. My name's Nopalito, and I create art through photos.